I woke that morning believing nothing could overshadow our daughter's graduation, yet a quiet unease followed me, like a shadow I couldn't name. I ironed my dress slowly, as if smoothing fabric could calm the buzzing in my chest. My husband kissed my forehead before leaving for his shift, promising he'd meet us at the auditorium. He always kept his promises, especially the ones involving her. But that morning his smile felt tighter, pulled at the edges by something he didn't say. I noticed, but pretended not to. We'd been doing that too often lately. Our daughter bounced around the house, humming with excitement and nerves. Her cap kept slipping off, and we laughed every time she tried to fix it. I checked my phone twice, expecting a message from him, but the screen stayed blank. There was no reason to worry, I told myself, even as my heartbeat suggested otherwise. The sky outside looked unusually heavy for early summer, a dull blue pressing downward. I forced myself to focus on the happy chaos of the morning. Graduation was supposed to be simple, celebratory, uncomplicated, but nothing about this day stayed simple for long. And deep down, I think I knew that before anything even happened. By the time we got into the car, I had rehearsed the moment he would appear walking across the parking lot. He would wave too broadly, pretending to spot us dramatically late. Our daughter would roll her eyes but smile, his favorite reaction. I clung to that imagined scene as if it were already a memory. The drive felt both too long and too short, my thoughts twisting in circles. I wondered whether he'd eaten, whether he'd slept enough the night before. He'd been quieter lately, carrying tension like a second skin. Still, I trusted him to tell me if something were truly wrong, or at least I hoped I could still trust that. When we parked, our daughter grabbed my hand with nervous excitement. Families streamed toward the entrance in colorful waves of anticipation. I glanced at my phone again. Still nothing. I told myself he was just busy, that he'd text any moment. But the silence, once again, felt heavier than it should have, and the weight of it pressed against my ribs. Inside the auditorium, the air buzzed with the chatter of parents and classmates. Programs rustled, heels clicked, laughter rose and fell like shifting tides. I scanned the crowd repeatedly, searching for his familiar posture. He should have been there by then. He knew how crowded this event would be. I tried not to imagine him rushing through traffic or stuck behind some last-minute call. Our daughter kept looking over her shoulder, expecting him. Her smile dimmed a little each time she didn't see him. I tightened my grip on her shoulders and reassured her he'd arrive soon. But reassurance is a fragile thing when built on guesses. My phone buzzed, and relief surged, only for me to discover it wasn't him. A message from a friend wishing us congratulations. Nothing more. I blinked hard, refusing to let frustration take root. He cared. He always cared. He wouldn't willingly miss this moment. At least, that's what I repeated to myself. The ceremony started before I realized how much time had passed. Lights dimmed, music swelled, and a hush fell over the room. I sat in the aisle seat, the one we had saved for him. That chair felt louder than everything else around me. I kept turning toward the entrance, expecting him to slip in apologetically. Sometimes I even imagined seeing him there, just a trick of hope. But the doorway stayed stubbornly empty each time. Our daughter walked across the stage with her chin lifted bravely. I clapped so hard my palms stung, forcing a smile big enough for two. But inside, guilt knotted with worry, each tightening the other. I held the camera steady even though my hands shook. The cheering crowd blurred, then sharpened again when I blinked. The entire moment felt incomplete, like a photo missing its frame. I knew she felt it too. She didn't need to say it. Some absences echo louder than any applause. After the ceremony, families spilled into the lobby with flowers and embraces. People moved in bright, swirling clusters of celebration. I watched them while pretending not to notice the empty place beside me. Our daughter posed for pictures, smiling beautifully, though softer than usual. I kept telling myself he would appear any second, breathless and apologetic, but my phone stayed silent, stubbornly dark in my hand. When my in-laws approached, I braced myself instinctively. My mother-in-law's expression already carried judgment. She didn't even wait for a greeting before speaking. "Irresponsible," she muttered, shaking her head. As if work is more important than his own daughter. Her words cut sharply, slicing through the fragile calm I was holding. I opened my mouth to respond, but emotion clogged my voice. They didn't know anything yet, not the full story, not even a fraction, but they had already decided who he was. I tried to explain that he wrote saying something urgent had happened, but my father-in-law raised a dismissive hand. "There's always something with that job," he said, loud enough to draw attention. My daughter stiffened beside me, her smile fading. She wasn't used to hearing her father spoken about that way. I felt heat rising in my throat, anger mixed with helplessness. How could I defend him without knowing what he was facing? How could I blame them for reacting when they didn't have the facts? Yet how could they speak so easily, so carelessly? Their disappointment leaked into the air like spilled ink. People around us began to glance over curiously. I wanted the floor to open and swallow the entire scene. Not because I felt ashamed of him, quite the opposite. I just knew deep inside that something serious was happening, and their harshness only deepened the dread curling inside my chest. We stepped outside for fresh air, though the warmth felt stifling. I texted him again, "Are you safe? Please answer." The message delivered, but no reply came. Our daughter watched me anxiously, chewing her lip. She tried to be strong, but uncertainty weighed on her. I pulled her into a hug, wishing I could offer clarity instead of vague hope. Cars honked in the distance. People laughed, cameras flashed. Life went on around us, refusing to pause for our worry. My in-laws lingered nearby, still muttering complaints under their breath. Every word felt like a stone thrown at someone who wasn't there to defend himself. I tried to breathe deeply, but each inhale felt shallow and tight. I kept thinking of his last message. A critical situation. He'd never used those words so plainly before. The gravity of it clung to me like smoke. Something terrible must have kept him away. On the ride home, silence filled the car with an almost physical density. Our daughter held her diploma in her lap, tracing the edges absent-mindedly. I kept checking my phone every minute, desperate for any update. The drive blurred into long stretches of worry and unfinished thoughts. Traffic lights glowed too bright, as if the world were out of balance. I replayed every moment of the morning, wondering what I missed. Was he already facing danger when he left? Did he know something he didn't want to tell me? Had I ignored the fear behind his tired smile? Questions stacked inside me, heavy and shifting. I wanted answers, but answers refused to come. Our daughter glanced at me, her eyes wide and searching. "Mom, do you think he's okay?" she whispered. I squeezed her hand, wishing confidence felt real. "I think he's doing something incredibly brave," I finally said. When we pulled into the driveway, everything looked painfully normal. Birds chirped, neighbors watered lawns, the world stayed intact. Our house waited quietly, unaware of what was unraveling elsewhere. I unlocked the door with trembling fingers, forcing routine into chaos. Our daughter placed her flowers on the table, their scent too sweet. I set my phone on the counter, though I couldn't stop staring at it. Every second without news stretched unbearably long. I paced the kitchen, replaying worst-case scenarios. I tried to resist. I imagined him standing between danger and safety, as he always did, but this time felt different, sharper, darker, more uncertain. I thought of the seat he didn't fill at the ceremony, the silence where applause should have been shared, the memory we should have celebrated together, and the unknown he was facing alone. The contrast made my chest ache. Finally, I received a message, just one short line. "I'll explain everything when I get home." Relief hit first, fierce and overwhelming. Then fear followed quickly, asking, "Explain what?" If things were fine, he would have said so directly. If danger had passed, he would have reassured us instantly. The vague promise of explanation carried its own weight. Our daughter leaned over my shoulder to read it. Her breath caught, and she whispered, "He's alive." I hugged her tightly, savoring the truth in those words. But the unease continued rumbling beneath the relief. What had he faced that he couldn't talk about yet? Why was he choosing silence instead of comfort? I sensed a story forming, one that would change everything, one that would make the empty seat at graduation feel different, not forgiven, but understood. Evening light spilled softly across the living room walls. Shadows stretched long, bending around familiar corners. We waited for him, each minute folding into the next. Every sound outside made me jump, hoping it was him arriving. I kept replaying my in-laws' harsh words in my mind. I wanted to defend him, but I didn't yet know how. Maybe that was what hurt the most. Not the accusations themselves, but the helplessness they exposed. Our daughter changed into comfortable clothes, looking exhausted. She lay on the couch with her head on my lap, diploma still nearby. I stroked her hair, trying to calm both of us. We didn't speak. Silence felt more honest than words. Hope flickered quietly between us, fragile but persistent, and beneath it lived a darker truth. We both sensed something enormous was unfolding. When the sound of his key finally turned in the lock, I froze. For a second, fear and relief battled inside me. Then he stepped in, and the sight of him stole my breath. His shoulders sagged with exhaustion, eyes shadowed by something heavy. He looked like a man who had seen far too much in a single day. Before I could speak, he whispered, "I'm so sorry." Our daughter ran to him, and he pulled her close. I watched his hands tremble as he held her. Only then did I realize the magnitude of whatever he had stopped. He kissed the top of her head, then looked at me with hollow eyes. "We prevented a shooting today," he said quietly. The room seemed to tilt around me, the words echoing sharply. Everything inside me cracked open, fear, pride, disbelief. The seat he missed at graduation hadn't been abandonment, it had been sacrifice. He sank onto the couch as if gravity had doubled the moment he crossed the doorway. I stood there, unsure whether to hold him or give him space, torn between fear and love. His breathing was uneven, not from exertion but from everything he refused to release. Our daughter stayed close, clutching his arm as if anchoring him to the present. He brushed her cheek gently, though his hand trembled with exhaustion. I had seen him tired before, but this was different. This was soul-worn. He kept his eyes on the floor, as if afraid that meeting mine would unleash everything. The silence stretched long enough to become another presence in the room. I sat beside him, close enough that our knees touched. He swallowed hard, gathering strength for words he didn't want to speak. The clock ticked loudly, its rhythm strangely intrusive in the quiet. I reached for his hand, and he let me take it without hesitation. Only then did he draw in a slow, unsteady breath. "It started with a call from one of the school janitors," he murmured, and with that, the world around us shifted, preparing to receive the truth. He said the janitor had noticed a boy pacing behind the gym long before classes began. The boy's movements were erratic, as if he were arguing with someone unseen. When approached, he bolted, clutching his backpack in a way that raised alarms. This wasn't unusual. Students had rough days, emotional mornings, moments of panic. But something about his behavior made the janitor dial security immediately. My husband was only minutes away when the call came through. He told us he felt a pull, a familiar instinct he learned not to ignore. He drove faster than regulations allowed, ignoring the weight of consequences. When he reached the school grounds, the boy was still there, near the back exit. A teacher had tried speaking to him, but he refused to respond. My husband's voice cracked as he recounted the details. He didn't elaborate on the emotions he felt. He rarely did. But I sensed the fear he carried underneath every word. "This wasn't a misunderstanding," he finally said quietly. "Something was terribly wrong, and we all felt it." He paused, rubbing his forehead as if trying to wipe away the memory. I waited, giving him the silence he needed to continue. He said he approached slowly, calling the boy's name with practiced calm. The boy flinched, gripping the straps of his backpack with trembling hands. My husband took a step closer, then another, resisting the urge to rush. The school behind them was waking up, students arriving, buses unloading. Every passing second increased the stakes, though no one knew it yet. A soft breeze moved across the field, carrying scattered voices from the parking lot. He asked again, this time more firmly, if the boy was all right. That was when he saw the outline of something rigid inside the bag, not clearly shaped, not entirely visible, but unmistakably wrong. He froze for a beat, just one heartbeat, and then acted. The training he'd undergone for years surged forward instinctively. He radioed for immediate backup, keeping his tone neutral. Inside, though, he said he felt a cold certainty settle in his bones. "I kept thinking of our daughter," he whispered, voice trembling despite his control. "She was in a building just like that one not long ago." His eyes glistened, but he didn't let the tears fall. The boy began pacing again, muttering under his breath, gripping the backpack harder. My husband stayed several feet away, palms open, posture low and calm. He asked gently if the boy wanted to talk, but the boy shook his head violently. For a moment, everything around them stilled, birds, wind, distant chatter. Then the boy whispered something that chilled my husband to the core. He said, "It's too late. I already made up my mind." Those words hung in our living room like a ghost refusing to leave. I felt my hands tighten involuntarily, my chest constricting. He continued, letting the weight of the moment build naturally. The boy began reaching into the bag, and my husband stepped forward sharply, not aggressively, not threateningly, just decisively. The kind of decision that divides one future from another. He described how he positioned himself between the boy and the nearest building entrance. Students were still arriving, unaware of how close danger stood to them. My husband motioned discreetly for a teacher to guide incoming children back. The teacher hesitated at first, confused, but quickly caught on. With calm urgency, she redirected them toward another door. Inside the bag, the boy's hand moved again, desperate and conflicted. My husband kept talking to him, grounding him with the sound of a steady voice. "You're not alone," he told him. "You don't have to do anything today." The boy shook his head, eyes glassy with fear and determination. He thought he had no choices left, my husband said softly. He explained how tragedies begin not with weapons, but with hopelessness. I felt a lump rise in my throat as I pictured it all. The tension, the risk. Everything that could have unfolded if one movement had gone differently. My husband pressed forward with the memory anyway. He started crying, he recalled, and that was when I knew we still had a chance. Backup arrived silently, fanning out with precision and caution. They didn't want to escalate things by startling the boy. My husband signaled for them to wait, to let him keep the lead. He had already built the fragile connection that held the moment together. The boy wiped his face with the back of his sleeve, shaking uncontrollably. He whispered that he didn't want to hurt anyone, but didn't know how to stop himself. My husband took a slow step closer, speaking softer now. "You did the right thing, asking for help, even if it wasn't out loud," he told him. Those words seemed to reach the boy in a way nothing else had. His grip on the backpack loosened for the first time. One of the officers behind my husband exhaled quietly. The risk was still there, still palpable, still real, but shifting. The boy finally lowered the bag to the ground, tears dripping onto the fabric. My husband extended his hand, steady and patient, and after a long moment, the boy let go. When the officers secured the bag, they found weapons inside, enough to confirm every fear. But my husband didn't dwell on that detail as he spoke. Instead, he focused on the boy. How lost he had been, how close he came to disaster. He explained that the boy had reached a breaking point no one saw coming. Family turmoil, isolation, months of silence from people who didn't know he was drowning. A storm that had grown too heavy for him to hold alone. My husband talked to him until the paramedics arrived. The boy kept apologizing, his voice cracking with guilt and confusion. "I kept telling him he wasn't a monster," my husband said firmly. "He was a child in pain, and he needed help, not punishment." His compassion in that moment stunned me, though it shouldn't have. He had always believed in seeing people beyond their worst moments. He had always believed prevention was more powerful than force. I felt a strange mix of pride and sorrow swelling inside me. He had stood unarmed between danger and innocence, and won. As he recounted the moment the boy was escorted safely away, he exhaled shakily. "That's when it hit me. I had missed the ceremony," he murmured. The remorse in his voice was raw, even though he had saved countless lives. He said he checked the time and felt a crushing weight in his chest. He pictured our daughter walking the stage, scanning the room for him. He imagined the disappointment he feared he had caused her. He wanted to call me right then, but procedures kept him from using his phone. He felt torn in two, duty on one side, fatherhood on the other. He said it was one of the heaviest moments he'd experienced, not because of danger, but because of love. I reached for his hand again, squeezing it gently. He looked at me with eyes full of apology he didn't owe. "You were exactly where you needed to be," I whispered, but he shook his head slowly. He wasn't ready to forgive himself yet. He said the police chief arrived on scene shortly after everything had de-escalated. They spoke privately, reviewing every detail to ensure nothing had been overlooked. The chief commended him, placing a hand on his shoulder in rare emotion, but my husband said he felt strangely hollow, disconnected from praise. His mind was already drifting toward us, toward what he had missed. He worried that our daughter would remember the empty seat more than the reason for it. He worried I had spent the ceremony alone, unsure whether he was safe. Every worry spiraled into another, creating a maze of guilt in his chest. The chief insisted on giving him the rest of the day off. At first, I refused, he said softly. I didn't feel like I deserved rest. His humility made my throat tighten. He had given everything he had, yet still felt it wasn't enough. Eventually, the chief persuaded him to go home. But he drove slowly, burdened by the thought of disappointing us. He had saved a school, but felt he had failed his family. When he finished telling the story, he leaned back, eyes closing briefly. A long silence settled over the room, not tense, but reverent. Our daughter moved first, sitting beside him and wrapping her arms around his waist. He held her tightly, burying his face in her hair. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, voice trembling. He inhaled sharply, as if those words pierced straight through him. He kept repeating, "I should have been there," his voice low and strained. But she shook her head firmly, gripping his hands. "You saved other kids' graduations," she said. "That matters too." Tears finally slipped down his cheeks, silent but unstoppable. I placed my hand on his shoulder, grounding him gently. We stayed like that, the three of us intertwined, letting the emotions flow. Not just fear, not just relief, something deeper, something transformative. For the first time that day, I saw a flicker of peace in his expression. A fragile peace, but real. Later, after our daughter went upstairs to change, he sat quietly beside me. The living room felt heavier, yet somehow safer than before. He rested his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as though searching for clarity. "I didn't want to scare you," he said softly. "That's why I kept my message vague." I nodded, understanding even if part of me wished he'd said more. "I thought of you both the whole time," he added. His voice carried a tremor of vulnerability he rarely showed. I placed my hand over his, feeling the warmth return slowly. "You didn't choose between us and them," I told him. "You protected both." He swallowed hard, emotions flickering across his face like shifting shadows. For a moment, he leaned into me, letting his guard drop completely. The weight he had carried alone all day began to lift, piece by piece. I felt it in his breath, in the way his shoulders loosened. Not healed, not yet, but beginning to unburden. And that was enough for now. Before going to bed, he stepped into our daughter's room. I watched from the hallway as he tucked her diploma beside her lamp. She looked up at him with eyes filled not with disappointment, but admiration. He knelt beside her bed, brushing her hair back gently. "I wish I could have seen you walk that stage," he whispered. She smiled softly, placing her hand on his cheek. "You'll see every stage I walk from now on," she said. He exhaled a shaky laugh, overwhelmed by her forgiveness. He kissed her forehead and stood slowly, exhaustion settling in again. When he turned off the light, the room glowed with a quiet warmth, a warmth built not from perfection, but from understanding. As we walked toward our bedroom, his fingers intertwined with mine. He didn't speak, but he didn't need to. The strength in his grip said everything. The day had broken him open, but it had also brought us closer together. The morning after the incident felt strangely fragile, like thin glass underfoot. Sunlight entered the kitchen softly, yet my husband flinched at its brightness. He moved slowly, every gesture weighed down by exhaustion and memory. Our daughter watched him quietly, unsure how to approach him now. She had forgiven him, but she still sensed the heaviness he carried. I brewed coffee while listening to the silence stretch between us. Silence, I learned, has different shades after a day like that. His was tired, reflective, almost wounded in a quiet way. I wished I could lift the burden from his shoulders, but healing rarely accepts shortcuts, even when we crave them. He finally sat at the table, hands around a cooling cup. I sat across from him, waiting for him to speak first. He opened his mouth a few times, then closed it again softly. It felt like watching someone relearn how to breathe, and all I could do was stay steady beside him. Our daughter left for a friend's house, wanting to give him space. The door clicked shut, leaving the house breathless again. He rubbed his temples slowly, as if massaging away invisible echoes. "I thought I was fine," he whispered, voice thin and cracking. "But today, everything feels too loud." Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to reach him sharply. Trauma doesn't always roar. Sometimes it murmurs persistently. I moved my chair closer, touching his arm gently. "You don't have to be fine today," I told him. He closed his eyes briefly, accepting the truth of that. He had been everyone's protector yesterday, but protectors bleed quietly even when unwounded. He finally breathed deeply, grounding himself again. "I just didn't expect backlash on top of everything," he murmured, and I knew immediately what he meant. My in-laws arrived unannounced before noon, carrying tension at their heels. I knew this confrontation was inevitable, but not so soon. My husband stiffened the moment he heard their voices. His mother entered first, lips pressed into a narrow line. His father followed closely, already shaking his head. "You missed her graduation," his mother began sharply. Her tone carried disappointment dressed as righteous certainty, as if she had rehearsed every accusation beforehand. My husband swallowed hard, bracing himself silently. "I didn't miss it by choice," he replied softly. His father scoffed before he finished speaking. "There's always an excuse with your job," he muttered. I stepped forward instinctively, ready to defend him, but my husband raised a gentle hand, urging patience. He wanted to tell them himself, even if it hurt. He explained everything, methodically, honestly, without embellishment. He told them about the boy, the backpack, the trembling voice. He told them about the hopelessness he saw in the boy's eyes. He described the moment when control could have shattered. He spoke of courage not as heroism, but as necessity, and he told them how narrowly tragedy had been prevented. I watched their expressions shift with each detail. Shock overshadowed their indignation. Then shame crept in quietly. His mother covered her mouth, stunned into silence. His father took a step back, as if physically pushed. But the damage had already been done to him. Their earlier words still clung to him like thorns. He didn't seek validation, he only wanted understanding. A simple acknowledgement that his absence wasn't neglect, but no apology came. Not yet. His mother finally spoke, but her voice trembled with conflict. "I didn't know," she whispered, unable to meet his eyes. My husband nodded, but the gesture held no relief, not when the wound had already been opened wide. His father cleared his throat awkwardly, staring at the floor. "You should have told us sooner," he said stiffly. The comment landed like another careless blow. Tension tightened my stomach as my husband inhaled slowly. "I wasn't allowed to discuss details immediately," he explained, "and I barely processed what happened myself." Still, his father avoided acknowledging fault. Some people fear admitting they were wrong. It threatens the certainty they cling to. My husband simply folded his hands, composed but fragile, and I wished they understood the cost of their judgment. When they finally left, the house felt heavier, not lighter. My husband stood in the hallway long after the door closed. His shoulders slumped in a way that broke my heart. "You okay?" I asked softly, stepping toward him. He shook his head once, eyes lingering on nothing. "I didn't expect praise," he said. But I didn't expect condemnation either. His voice carried the weight of overlapping burdens, burden from the day before, burden from the people who should have supported him, burden from the guilt he still wrongly held. I placed a hand on his back, steady and warm. "You acted with courage," I whispered, "and courage is rarely understood immediately." He leaned into me slightly, a silent surrender. We spent the afternoon in quiet, each processing in our own way. He sat near the window, letting sunlight rest across his hands. Sometimes he closed his eyes, revisiting moments I couldn't see. Sometimes he simply breathed, long and deliberate breaths. Healing is never linear. I reminded myself gently. He wasn't broken. He was overwhelmed by humanity, by what he saved, and by what he risked losing. I wanted to reach him, but some distances must be crossed alone. Still, I stayed nearby, an anchor within reach. Every few minutes, he glanced at me, grounding himself again, not through words, but presence. Sometimes presence carries more weight than comfort. Eventually, he whispered, "Thank you for being here." I squeezed his hand in response. "I always will be." By evening, our daughter returned, carrying lightness into the house. She hugged her father tightly, refusing to let go immediately. He melted into the embrace, tension softening in his posture. She talked about her day, her friends, small joys that felt golden. He listened, truly listened, as if absorbing sunlight from her words. Her forgiveness continued to soothe him in quiet waves. Children have a way of healing what the world breaks. She showed him her graduation photos again. This time, he looked at them without flinching. He smiled, even laughed softly at one blurry shot. His eyes softened in a way they hadn't in days. Love can rebuild what fear dismantles, and she was unknowingly rebuilding him piece by piece. The room felt brighter just because she was in it. Hope breathed again between all three of us. Later, after she went to shower, we stepped onto the porch together. The evening air was cool, brushing gently against our skin. He exhaled deeply, as if releasing something trapped inside. "I keep replaying everything," he admitted. Not the danger, but the moment I realized I missed her walk. Guilt flickered across his face again, faint but stubborn. I turned toward him, placing both hands on his arms. "You didn't fail her," I said firmly. "You protected countless other children from never coming home." He looked down, absorbing my words slowly. "Do you really believe that?" he whispered. "With everything I am," I replied. His breathing steadied, though doubt still lingered. Healing takes repetition, not a single reassurance, and I was ready to repeat it 1,000 times. As night fell, we talked more openly than we had in months. Not about danger, but about fear, hope, and second chances. He admitted he sometimes felt unseen in his line of work, that prevention rarely earns applause because crises never occur. People praise heroes, but seldom guardians. His words ached with quiet truth. I told him he didn't need a stage to matter. He mattered in the lives he changed before harm ever arrived. He mattered in the family he protected fiercely. He mattered in ways he never acknowledged. He listened, letting my words sink in slowly. The moon rose behind him, casting soft light over his features. He looked peaceful for the first time since the incident, not fully healed, but no longer drowning. And that alone felt like a miracle. Inside, the house settled into nighttime stillness. Our daughter read in her room, music humming softly. My husband paced the hallway once before stopping at her door. He watched her quietly, pride warming his expression. "I didn't deserve her grace yesterday," he said. "You deserved every bit of it," I replied. He shook his head, still wrestling with old doubts, but the longer he looked at her, the more his doubt softened. She wasn't holding resentment, only love. And love, freely given, rewrites even the deepest wounds. He whispered goodnight to her, voice gentle and steady. Then he joined me in the hall, looking lighter than before. "Maybe I can start forgiving myself," he murmured. I reached for his hand and held it firmly. "That's all I want for you." When we finally lay in bed, the quiet felt comforting instead of tense. He rested his head on my shoulder, breathing evenly. "I'm glad I came home to you two," he whispered. My heart softened at the vulnerability in his tone. "You'll always have a place to return to," I promised. He interlaced our fingers slowly, as if memorizing the moment. The darkness no longer felt heavy, only calm. Outside, crickets chirped in small, steady rhythms. Inside, his breathing synced with mine effortlessly. Part of him was still healing, but another part was waking again. I felt the shift like a quiet sunrise breaking through clouds. He had faced danger, judgment, and self-doubt, but here, in the dim warmth of our room, he was safe. And safety, I realized, wasn't just the absence of threat, it was the presence of love that refused to give up. The next morning, the world seemed to wake before we did. My phone buzzed repeatedly on the nightstand, persistent and sharp. I ignored it at first, wanting one more moment of quiet beside him. He slept lightly, shadows still clinging beneath his eyes. His breath was steady, but tinged with the fatigue of yesterday. I brushed a hand across his hair, grateful he was safe. Then the phone buzzed again, longer this time. I finally reached for it, careful not to disturb him. Notifications filled the screen, endless and startling. Messages, missed calls, links to news articles. The story had already spread farther than we expected. Authorities had released details without names, but communities knew. People were calling him a hero before he even woke up. I looked at him, peaceful in sleep, unaware of the storm outside. He had no idea how loudly the world was speaking his name. When he stirred awake, his first instinct was to apologize again. Old guilt still tugged at him in stubborn waves. I placed my hand over his mouth gently, stopping the apology. "No more of that today," I whispered softly. He nodded, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face with both hands. "Did my parents say anything else?" he asked quietly. The question cut deeper than he realized. I shook my head, choosing honesty over comfort. "They're processing everything," I said carefully. He looked away, disappointment tightening his jaw. He wanted acknowledgement, not praise, just understanding, but healing rarely comes from the sources we hope for. I handed him my phone instead. "You need to see this," I said gently. He scrolled slowly, absorbing the headlines without expression. "School attack. Prevented by security officials, quick action. Community praises. Anonymous officer after close call." Dozens of variations told the same story in different tones. He paused when he reached messages from co-workers. Most were filled with gratitude, awe, and relief. "You saved lives, man," one text read. Another simply said, "Thank you for standing where others couldn't." But he didn't smile. He didn't bask in the praise. Instead, he set the phone down, shoulders heavy again. "I didn't do it for recognition," he whispered. "I just didn't want anyone to get hurt." I touched his arm gently, grounding him. "You didn't do it for applause," I reminded him, "but others are allowed to be grateful." Our daughter came downstairs still wearing her graduation hoodie. She hugged him tightly, refusing to let go for several seconds. Her love always reached him faster than anyone else's. She showed him the messages her friends had sent her. Many praised her father, calling him brave, calling him incredible. One wrote, "Your dad saved us and we didn't even know." She read them aloud with a quiet pride she didn't hide. He listened, absorbing each word slowly. But when she finished, he shook his head softly. "You deserve the spotlight right now, not me," he said. She crossed her arms defiantly. "I don't want a spotlight without you in it," she replied. Her voice carried a conviction stronger than her years. He blinked hard, emotion tightening his throat. Love, again, began stitching him back together. Later that morning, neighbors started stopping by unannounced. Some carried flowers, others brought home-baked food. One teacher from the affected school arrived in tears. She hugged my husband without asking, shaking with gratitude. "You saved my students," she whispered. "I don't know how to thank you." My husband froze for a moment, overwhelmed by her emotion. He finally placed his hands gently on her shoulders. "I'm just glad everyone is safe," he said quietly. She nodded, wiping her tears and stepping back, but not before pressing a thank you card into his hand. The gesture nearly undid him in the softest way. After she left, he sank into a chair again. The gratitude touched him deeply, but also weighed heavily. Being seen felt both healing and frightening. Around noon, a reporter knocked on our door. She carried a camera crew trailing behind her cautiously. I felt my husband stiffen beside me instantly. He wasn't ready for the world to step inside our home. Not after everything he had already carried. The reporter introduced herself politely. No aggression in her tone. "We're not here to pressure you," she assured gently. "We just want to tell the story accurately." My husband shook his head slowly. "The story isn't about me," he said. "It's about preventing tragedy before it begins." His refusal was calm, firm, and undeniably final. She respected it, stepping back with understanding. Some heroes aren't meant for cameras. Some stories belong to quiet living rooms. After the reporters left, the house grew still again. My husband stood by the window, lost in thought. His reflection looked older, wiser, and wearier. I approached him softly, unsure if he wanted company. He didn't turn fully, but he didn't pull away either. "I don't understand why I feel this way," he murmured. "Everyone is thanking me, but all I feel is drained." His honesty held no shame, only vulnerability. Trauma takes energy even when outcomes are good. I touched his arm gently, offering quiet solidarity. "You carried fear that wasn't yours to carry," I said, "and your body is still letting go of it." He nodded slowly, absorbing the truth. "Maybe," he whispered, "maybe that's exactly it." He spent the afternoon sitting quietly on the porch swing, not brooding, just breathing, simply existing for a while. Our daughter joined him with lemonade, chatting softly. Her presence provided a comfort he didn't have to earn. He smiled at her more than once, small and genuine. She told him stories she thought might make him laugh. He laughed at two of them, both times surprising himself. I watched from the door, warmed by their closeness. She didn't ask about the danger or details. She focused on life, not fear. And life was exactly what he needed. When she rested her head on his shoulder, he kissed her hair. The moment felt fragile and beautiful. A reminder of everything he still fought for. A reminder of why he had chosen to stand between danger and innocence. When evening came, he finally spoke more openly. "I think part of me is still stuck there," he admitted, "still listening for the moment things could go wrong." I sat beside him, our knees touching softly. "You're home now," I told him, "but your mind hasn't caught up yet." He nodded, tracing a line on the porch wood. "I keep hearing the boy's voice," he said. "Not the danger, but his fear." He sighed deeply, shoulders sagging. He wasn't evil, just overwhelmed. His empathy always reached places others avoided. It made him strong in a way many misunderstood, but empathy also carried weight. A weight he was still learning to set down. Night fell quietly, wrapping the neighborhood in softness. Crickets hummed, porch lights glowed faintly, and calm returned. We ate dinner together, simple and warm. He ate slowly, but he finished everything on his plate, a sign he was grounding himself again. Our daughter talked about her upcoming summer plans. He listened with genuine interest, offering ideas and jokes. For a moment, he looked entirely like himself again, not the man from yesterday, worn and shaken, but the man we loved, steady and open-hearted. After dinner, he helped wash the dishes. Water ran over his hands as he stared quietly. "I feel more human tonight," he finally said. I smiled softly, leaning into him. "That's all I want for you." Before bed, he stepped outside alone for a few minutes. I watched from the doorway, giving him space. He tilted his head toward the sky, breathing slowly. Moonlight brushed across his features gently. He looked peaceful, contemplative, almost reborn. When he returned inside, his expression had softened. "I think I understand something now," he said quietly. "What's that?" I asked. "I didn't fail our daughter," he whispered. "I was protecting someone else's child too." The realization washed over him with relief, not pride, just truth. He exhaled deeply, shoulders easing at last. He kissed my forehead softly, and for the first time he believed his own worth. We settled into bed with the lights low and gentle. He rested his hand over mine, warm and steady. His breathing matched the rhythm of the quiet room. "You're here," I whispered, "and safe." He nodded softly, eyes closing slowly. "I'm starting to feel safe again," he murmured. The admission touched me deeply. Healing had begun, not loudly but sincerely, not in headlines or applause, but in small moments. Moments where he allowed himself to be human, moments where we held him together. He slipped into sleep, peacefully beside me. The storm had passed, but the rebuilding remained. And we would face that, one gentle step at a time. The next few days unfolded like a blur, stitched together with emotion. Everywhere we went, people recognized him, even without his name released. Word spreads fast in small communities, especially when gratitude fuels it. Neighbors waved more warmly, teachers approached him softly, parents nodded reverently. He accepted each gesture politely, but the attention unsettled him. He wasn't used to being seen, not in this way, not this loudly. His work usually operated in shadows, prevention often invisible to most. Now, people looked at him with expectation, admiration, awe. He carried each reaction with careful restraint, unsure where to place the weight. Some thanked him with trembling voices, others with quiet tears. He listened to all of them, though the praise made him uneasy. At home, I watched him grapple with the sudden shift. Recognition can be healing for some, but overwhelming for others. Especially for a man who saw the pain behind the danger, especially for someone who never wanted a spotlight. One afternoon, a local councilwoman requested a meeting with him. She left a voicemail filled with sincere appreciation and urgency. He listened to it twice, thumb hovering over the delete button. I watched his expression, torn between obligation and discomfort. "I don't want this to turn into something political," he said softly. His fear wasn't dramatic, just rooted in experience. Public stories often twist, even when intentions are good. Still, I sensed a deeper hesitation beneath his words. He struggled with accepting praise when he felt so fragile. Trauma complicates even simple gratitude. "I'll go," he finally decided, though his voice lacked conviction. Not out of pride, but responsibility. He believed in truth more than attention. He wanted the focus on safety, not heroism. and I admired him deeply for that. The meeting was scheduled at a small community center nearby. We drove there together, our daughter staying with a friend. He tapped his fingers lightly on his leg during the ride, a sign he was nervous, though he rarely admitted fear. The parking lot was half full, quiet, except for distant chatter. He exhaled slowly before stepping out of the car. Inside, a modest crowd had gathered. Teachers, parents, officials, their eyes shifted toward him the moment we entered. He paused, shoulders tensing, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. I touched his arm gently, grounding him back into himself. The councilwoman approached with genuine warmth, not theatrics. She thanked him for preventing a tragedy our town will never forget. Her sincerity softened the tension in his posture slightly. Still, I sensed the pressure building behind his calm expression. Praise can feel like a weight when wounds are still fresh. He spoke to the group in a steady, respectful voice, not dramatically, not heroically, just with quiet honesty. He explained the importance of mental health support in schools. He highlighted the early signs that often go unnoticed or dismissed. He urged them to invest in training, counseling, communication. His words carried weight not because of fame, but experience. He never mentioned the boy by name, nor the specifics. He protected the child's dignity, even after everything. People listened with rapt attention, moved by his compassion. When he finished, a stillness filled the room briefly. Then applause broke out, louder than he expected. He winced subtly, overwhelmed by the intensity of it. He bowed his head slightly, uncomfortable with the spotlight. But gratitude radiated from the crowd like a warm tide, and for once he allowed himself to receive it. After the meeting, a father approached us quietly. His voice trembled as he introduced himself. "My son goes to that school," he said, barely steady. "I don't know how to thank you for keeping him safe." My husband tried to assure him that many people were involved. But the man shook his head, tears forming. "You were the one who stood there. You were the barrier between danger and our children." His sincerity hit my husband harder than expected. He looked down, emotions stirring beneath his calm exterior. The father squeezed his shoulder before leaving, a simple gesture, but it anchored my husband deeply, not in pride but in human connection. He finally whispered, "I didn't think it would affect people this much." And hearing that broke something open in both of us. On the drive home, he was quiet for a long time, the kind of quiet that wasn't avoidance, but reflection. Wind rushed softly against the windows as evening settled. I reached for his hand, letting my fingers brush his gently. He tightened his grip, grounding himself in the touch. "I'm grateful people are safe," he said at last, "but I don't feel like a hero. I just feel tired." His vulnerability filled the car, warm and raw. "You don't have to feel heroic," I whispered. "You only have to be human." He exhaled shakily, absorbing the truth. The world had labeled him brave overnight, but bravery doesn't erase exhaustion. Bravery often creates it, and he was still learning to carry both. Later that evening, he sat on the couch scrolling through messages. Some were from strangers, some from former co-workers. All thanked him, praised him, honored him. But one message made him pause completely. It was from the boy's mother. Her words were filled with sorrow and gratitude intertwined. She apologized for what her son had almost done. She thanked him for seeing her child as human. She admitted she didn't know how to help him before this. My husband read the message 3 times silently. Then he closed his eyes, overwhelmed in a new way. Compassion rose in him stronger than fatigue. He whispered, "I hope he gets the help he needs." Not anger, not bitterness, only hope. When he set the phone down, he leaned into me heavily. His weight felt different today, less rigid, more trusting. "I think I understand something," he murmured. "What?" I asked softly. "People aren't thanking me for being perfect," he said. "They're thanking me for being there." The simplicity of it brought tears to my eyes. He had always measured himself by impossible standards, but now he was learning to see value in presence alone. He rested his head against my shoulder. His breathing slowed, deepening in quiet relief. Healing wasn't sudden, it unfolded in layers, and today peeled back another one gently, for him, for all of us. After dinner, our daughter joined us in the living room. She carried a stack of drawings from younger kids at her school. They had made cards decorated with hearts, stars, and thank you notes. Some spelled his name wrong, others called him the brave helper. He smiled at each one, genuine and soft. Our daughter watched him with shining eyes. "Everyone at school is talking about you," she said. "They say you're amazing." He blushed slightly, unused to admiration. "I'm just your dad," he replied gently. "To me," she said, "that's the same thing." Her words landed with a warmth that filled the room. He pulled her into a hug, holding her lovingly. In that embrace, he looked more at peace than ever. Love had done what applause never could. Later, he stepped outside for fresh air, and I followed quietly. The sky stretched above us, deep blue, fading to night. Streetlights flickered on, painting warm circles of light. He leaned against the porch railing, staring thoughtfully ahead. "I think I'm afraid of disappointing people now," he confessed. "Everyone sees me as something I'm not sure I can live up to." I placed my hand over his, warm against the evening chill. "You don't owe the world perfection," I said softly. "You only owe yourself honesty." He looked at me, emotion flickering gently in his eyes. "And what do I owe you?" he whispered. "Just you," I said. "Nothing more, nothing less." He breathed deeply, letting reassurance settle in. The night felt softer around us. Before heading inside, he lingered under the porch light. Its glow softened the shadows on his face. He looked calmer, still healing, but no longer overwhelmed. "I didn't ask for any of this attention," he said, "but maybe it has a purpose." "What purpose?" I asked gently. "To remind people that prevention matters," he replied. "That compassion matters. That noticing someone can save lives." It wasn't about the event. His insight it was about the human threads behind it. He had always seen the world this way, but now others were finally seeing it through him. He stepped closer, brushing his fingers against mine. "I want to use this moment wisely," he murmured, and I believed him entirely. That night, as we prepared for bed, he paused near the mirror. He studied his reflection with quiet curiosity, not judging, not critiquing, just observing. "I don't look like a hero," he said softly. "You look like someone who carries others," I replied. He smiled faintly, humility softening every line of his face. He turned toward me, slipping his fingers through mine. "Thank you for holding me through all of this," he whispered. "I don't know how I would have managed alone." "You were never alone," I said. His eyes warmed, full of emotion he no longer hid. As we climbed into bed, the world outside felt distant. What mattered was here, in this room, in this family, and for the first time in days he fell asleep easily. Not because the world grew quieter, but because his heart had. 3 days after the incident, the house felt both calmer and heavier. Calmer because danger was past, heavier because emotion lingered. My husband moved through the rooms slowly, still thoughtful, still quiet. He wasn't withdrawn, just carrying something he hadn't yet named. Healing often hides behind ordinary motions, waiting to unfold gently. He made breakfast for us, though he barely touched his own plate. Our daughter chatted cheerfully, sensing he needed lightness. She chose stories that made him smile, even if faintly. He laughed once, surprising himself with the sound. It was small, but it felt like sunrise breaking inside our kitchen. I watched the shift carefully, lovingly, gratefully. Hope grows slowly after a shock, but it grows. Still, part of him remained distant, as if listening inward, quietness wrapped around him like a second skin, and I knew something deeper was stirring within him. Later that morning, he retreated to his small office. The door stayed half open, not fully closed, not fully inviting. He sat at his desk, sorting papers he barely glanced at. His mind clearly drifted elsewhere, far from clerical tasks. I hovered in the hallway for a moment, unsure whether to enter. I wanted to give him space, but also didn't want him sinking alone. Finally, I knocked softly, and he looked up slowly. His eyes were warm but slightly distant, as if returning from far away. "Can I come in?" I asked gently. He nodded, motioning toward the chair beside him. I sat quietly, letting silence stretch without pressure. Sometimes silence is an opening, not an absence. After a moment, he whispered, "My hands were shaking yesterday." He spread them slowly, palms up, as if still feeling the tremor. Fear after courage often arrives late. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling thoughtfully. "I wasn't scared during the moment," he murmured, "but afterward it hit me in waves. Delayed fear is one of trauma's quietest truths." I nodded, validating without pushing. "And now?" I asked softly. He hesitated before answering. Now I keep replaying the voice, what-ifs. Low, the words landed heavy between us, full of truth. What if I said the wrong thing? What if he panicked? What if I wasn't enough? Each question carried the weight of responsibility he lived with. I reached for his hand, grounding him gently. "You were there," I said, and that was enough to change everything. He closed his eyes, absorbing the reassurance slowly, but pain still flickered beneath his calm exterior. "I keep thinking about the boy," he admitted, "how frightened he was, how trapped he felt." Compassion filled his voice, not judgment. "He wasn't trying to be dangerous," he continued. "He just didn't know how to stop himself." He shook his head softly, eyes shining. I saw myself in him alone, overwhelmed, unheard. The confession startled me gently. I had known he carried old wounds from childhood, but he rarely spoke of them openly. "He deserved help long before that morning," he said, "and that breaks me more than anything." His heart was too large to ignore another's pain. I leaned closer, placing my hand over his chest. His heartbeat pulsed steadily beneath my palm. "You gave him help," I whispered. "Not just safety, hope." He breathed shakily, emotion softening his features. "But I keep wondering if I could have done more," he murmured. "Guilt threads itself through even the purest actions," I reminded firmly. "You reached him when no one else could." He stared at my hand, grounding himself in its warmth. Slowly, the tension in his shoulders eased, but a shadow still lingered in his expression. Not darkness, just depth. He felt everything too deeply, and that was both his ache and his gift. In the afternoon, he received a call from his supervisor. I watched his expression shift as he listened. Not fear, not dread, something like responsibility resurfacing. When he hung up, he exhaled long and slow. "They want me to speak at a district meeting next week." His voice wavered with uncertainty. "It's about prevention programs, mental health, protocols, topics he believed in, yet felt unprepared to approach publicly." "I don't know if I can," he confessed. "Not like this." Not while I'm still. He didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. Healing and leadership rarely arrive at the same pace. You don't have to decide today, I said softly. He nodded gratefully, tension loosening slightly. One step at a time had become our shared mantra. Our daughter returned from school carrying her own emotions. She dropped her backpack and hugged him tightly. "You okay today, Dad?" she asked gently. He smiled, touched by her awareness. "A little tired," he admitted. She nodded, studying him carefully. "Do you want to watch a movie with me later?" Her offer was tender, simple, healing. He glanced at me for a moment, then nodded. "I'd like that," he said softly. She beamed, then bounded upstairs, light and hopeful. I saw something soften inside him at her joy. Love from a child can reach places adults cannot. Her presence reminded him of normalcy, and normalcy was a step toward recovery. As evening approached, he settled onto the couch slowly. Our daughter curled beside him with a blanket. They chose a movie full of harmless humor and bright colors. I watched them from the doorway, savoring the softness. He laughed twice, quiet but genuine. His arm draped around her naturally, instinctively. Healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers through moments. At one point, she rested her head on his chest. His hand gently brushed her hair. He looked down at her with a peace I hadn't seen in days. A father grounding himself in love more than fear, a man remembering his purpose beyond crisis. When the movie ended, she kissed his cheek. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. "I love you too," he replied, voice warm and steady. Later, when she went to bed, we sat quietly together. The room glowed softly with lamplight, warm and comforting. He leaned back, staring thoughtfully at the ceiling. "I don't know how to be okay yet," he admitted quietly. "You don't have to be okay all at once," I said. He nodded, absorbing the patience in my voice. "I just feel things I didn't expect to feel." Trauma often opens doors to rooms we didn't know we had. He rubbed his hands together slowly, grounding himself. "What if this changes me?" he whispered. "It already has," I said gently, "but not in the way you fear." He looked at me, vulnerability shining. "You're still good." "And still whole," I added just softly. "Deeper now." He exhaled, leaning his head onto my shoulder. His weight felt honest, not heavy. A man allowing himself to be held. "Thank you for staying close," he murmured. "I don't feel lost with you here." His words warmed me to the core. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. The truth of it settled softly between us. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. "I didn't realize healing would feel like this," he whispered. "Like what?" I asked gently. "Like being rebuilt one piece at a time." I kissed his forehead, tender and slow. "You're not rebuilding alone," I said. "Not as long as I'm here." Before bed, he paused by the window. Night draped itself across the neighborhood gently. Stars blinked faintly, small promises of quiet. He stared out with a thoughtful calm. "I want to visit the school again," he suddenly said. The idea startled me, though not in fear. "Why?" I asked softly. "To see that everything really is okay," he whispered, "to remind myself of the good that came from the fear." His intention wasn't obsession, it was closure. "You can go when you're ready," I said. He nodded slowly, comforted by the permission. Healing asks for both courage and pacing. He was learning both gracefully, one breath, one step. When we finally lay in bed, he curled close without hesitation. His head rested near my shoulder, breath warm on my skin. No tension, no flinching, just quiet presence, a sign that safety was returning gently. "I'm not the same as before," he whispered. "I know," I said softly, "but neither is what you saved." He pressed a kiss to my collarbone, slow and grateful. His fingers intertwined with mine, firm and steady. "I'm glad you're walking through this with me," he murmured. "There's no other way I'd want to walk it," I replied. He exhaled, full and peaceful. Sleep came to him softly, naturally. For the first time, he didn't fight the darkness. He simply rested, whole, loved, healing. The next morning arrived quieter than the days before. Not silent, but softer, like the world exhaled with us. My husband moved calmly through the kitchen, brewing coffee. His hands still trembled faintly, but less than before. Healing rarely announces itself loudly, it whispers. Our daughter entered with sleepy eyes and warm smiles. She wrapped her arms around him from behind. He startled slightly, then relaxed into the embrace. "Morning, Dad," she murmured sweetly. "Morning, sweetheart," he replied with gentle warmth. He kissed her hair, grateful for small normalities. I watched them, heart swelling at their closeness. The fear that once shadowed him now seemed thinner, still present, but not suffocating. A tender shift, barely visible yet deeply felt. Later that day, he returned to his small office. The door stayed open, an unspoken invitation. Papers were scattered across the desk, training notes, reports, reminders. Some belonged to the incident, others to the days ahead. He sifted through them slowly, thoughtfully, patiently. When I stepped in, he offered a faint smile. "You don't have to hover," he teased gently. "I'm not hovering," I replied, though we both knew I was. He chuckled softly, the sound already a sign of lightning. He leaned back, stretching tired shoulders. "I've been thinking a lot," he admitted, "about everything that happened, and everything after." His tone wasn't heavy, just reflective, like someone ready to understand themselves anew. I sat beside him, listening with my whole heart. "I want to talk to someone," he said suddenly. The words hung in the air, delicate and brave. "You mean a counselor?" I asked carefully. He nodded, eyes open and honest. "I've carried too much alone for too long." The confession touched me deeper than I expected. Men like him rarely voiced their need for help, not because of pride, but because of habit. He looked down at his hands, studying them slowly. They were shaking that day, and after. I thought the trembling would stop once danger passed. But it didn't. It just changed shape. I reached forward, brushing his fingers softly. "I'm proud of you," I whispered. He closed his eyes, letting the words settle gently. He called the district wellness line that afternoon. I listened from the hallway, giving him space, yet staying near. His voice was calm but low, steady but vulnerable. He explained what happened without embellishment, no heroism, no dramatics, just truth. The counselor must have listened with care, because his shoulders gradually softened as he spoke. He nodded occasionally, murmuring soft responses. When the call ended, he sat quietly for a moment. Then he breathed out, long and full. "Asking for help wasn't as hard as I thought," he said. "It felt relieving." I smiled, absorbing his relief like sunlight. He was opening doors he had kept locked for years. Doors we didn't even realize were closed. That evening, it was from a teacher at the school he had protected. She wrote that several older students wanted to thank him personally, not in a public ceremony, but in a small, private gathering. "They want to understand what happened," he said softly, "and they want to understand how to be brave too." I watched emotion rise in his expression, tender, cautious, deep. He wasn't sure he was ready to face the school again. Not publicly, not with all the weight of memory. But students reaching out felt different, more personal, more human, more healing. "What do you think?" I asked gently. He hesitated before answering. I think Maybe I should go. And in that single decision, something shifted. The next afternoon, we drove to the school together. He insisted I come, needing a familiar presence near. The hallways were quiet, decorated with colorful art. Children's voices echoed faintly from distant classrooms. He slowed as we approached the room where the students waited. I could feel his heartbeat through his hand in mine, not frantic, just heightened, alive with memory and purpose. "You don't have to be perfect," I whispered. "You just have to be you." He nodded, taking one more steady breath. When the door opened, a handful of students sat waiting. Their eyes widened slightly when he entered, not with fear, only gratitude, only quiet respect. He stepped inside, and the room softened. The students asked gentle questions at first, questions about courage, fear, and instinct, not about danger, not in graphic ways. They cared more about his humanity than the event. "How did you stay calm?" one girl asked. He paused, choosing his answer carefully. "I wasn't calm," he admitted. "I was focused on the person in front of me." They listened intently, absorbing every nuance. Another boy asked, "Were you scared afterward?" He nodded slowly, openly. "Very," he said honestly. "But fear doesn't mean you failed. It means you cared enough to feel." The students exchanged thoughtful glances, deeply moved. As he spoke, I watched him transform gently, not into a hero, into himself, fully and authentically. His voice steadied, his shoulders eased. He wasn't reliving trauma. He was reclaiming truth. The students thanked him one by one. Some shook his hand, others offered drawings. One girl gave him a small bracelet she had made. "For protection," she whispered shyly. Emotion flickered across his face, pure and tender. He accepted the gift with reverent gratitude. Her simple gesture felt like balm on an unseen wound. He wore the bracelet immediately, tying it carefully. I felt tears prick behind my eyes. Kindness in small hands carries enormous power, and today it helped him heal. After leaving the school, we sat in the car quietly. He stared at the bracelet, thumb brushing its woven threads. "They looked at me with so much trust," he murmured. "And not because I stopped something bad, but because I talked to them honestly." Honesty, I realized, had become his greatest offering. He wasn't hiding behind composure anymore. He wasn't burying what hurt him. He was allowing others to see him fully, and in doing so, he found new strength. "You helped them understand bravery differently," I said. He looked at me, eyes warm. "And they helped me too," he whispered. "More than they know, more than anyone knew." When we arrived home, my in-laws were waiting again. This time, their posture wasn't rigid, just humbled. My stomach tightened, unsure how he would respond. They approached slowly, cautiously, hesitating at each step. His mother spoke first, voice trembling with sincerity. "Son, we were wrong," she whispered. "We judged before we understood." Her eyes filled with tears she didn't hide. His father cleared his throat, visibly emotional. "You did something extraordinary," he said softly, "and we're grateful you came home safe." For a moment, silence hung tenderly. Then my husband nodded gently, accepting but not boasting. "It hurt," he admitted softly, "but thank you for saying that." His mother reached for his hand and held it tightly. Her grip trembled, full of remorse and love. "I'm sorry for calling you irresponsible," she said. "You saved other people's children that day. And we should have stood by you, not against you." His father placed a hand on his shoulder gently. Pride softened the old man's stern features. "You showed courage I didn't understand at first," he said, "but I understand now." Tears welled in my husband's eyes silently, not from praise, from reconciliation, from being seen by those who mattered. Forgiveness flowed quietly through the room, not rushed, not forced, just real. Healing widened its circle. That night, he lay beside me more peacefully than ever, his breath slow, steady, deep in my ear. His body relaxed fully into the mattress, no tension in his shoulders, no shaking in his hands, just a quiet calm earned through truth and tenderness, through courage shared, not worn like armor. "I feel lighter," he whispered in the darkness, not fixed, but no longer carrying everything alone. I kissed his cheek softly, warm and slow. "You never had to carry it alone," I reminded him. He nodded, eyes closing with gentle relief. "I know that now," he murmured. Silence wrapped around us like a soft blanket, safe, warm, whole, and sleep came to him like grace. The following week began with a fragile calm in our home. Not emptiness, just a gentler rhythm like soft waves. My husband moved with quiet purpose, no longer drifting. He woke earlier, brewed strong coffee, set out breakfast. Each small gesture felt intentional and steady. Our daughter hummed through the kitchen, full of light. He watched her with gratitude softening his features. I noticed the change immediately. Subtle but meaningful. His shoulders no longer curled inward with tension. His eyes no longer darted toward shadows of memory. He was present, fully present, in a way that felt new, still healing, yes, but not trembling beneath the weight. He had begun carrying his story instead of being carried by it, and that shift formed its own quiet miracle, one we watched unfold gently day by day. Midweek brought an unexpected envelope in the mail. It was addressed to him with careful handwriting. He studied it quietly before opening it. Inside was a small stack of handwritten letters, each from a student at the school he had protected. Simple lines filled the pages with earnest sincerity. "Thank you for helping us. You made our school feel safe again. You cared when someone needed help." As he read, his expression softened deeply. He paused several times, overwhelmed by tenderness. These letters weren't about the event. They were about the person he had been that day, and the person he continued to be now. I watched emotion flicker through him like warm light. One letter in particular made him stop completely. A student had written, "You didn't scare the boy, you saved him." My husband read that line 3 times slowly. His breath caught slightly, touched by its truth. Someone young had seen what many adults overlooked. Not danger, humanity, not violence, pain, not a monster, just a hurting child. The wisdom in that letter moved him profoundly. He held the page with gentle reverence. "I didn't expect this kind of understanding," he whispered. "Kids notice more than we think," I said softly. "They see what adults forget to look for." He nodded, absorbing the depth of that. Gratitude shimmered quietly in his eyes. Later that day, he walked outside for fresh air. I followed, sensing he needed silent company. The afternoon sun cast warm gold across the porch. He sat slowly, breathing in the calm. "I'm learning to feel things without drowning," he said. His voice held a tender honesty. "I used to think strength meant shutting everything out. But maybe strength is letting things in gently." His insight warmed me from the inside out. Healing had broadened him in unexpected ways. Not harder, softer, not colder, deeper. He was shaping himself from compassion, not fear. And watching that growth felt sacred. A quiet expansion of the heart. That evening, our daughter showed him a school project. She had written an essay about invisible bravery. He blinked in surprise when he realized it was about him, not the event, just him as a father. She wrote about the way he hugged her, the way he listened, even on tired days, the way he taught her empathy by example. He read the essay slowly, line by line. Emotion gathered thick behind his eyes. He cleared his throat several times, overwhelmed. When he finished, he pulled her close, gently. "You see me better than anyone," he whispered. She smiled into his shoulder, glowing with pride. He kissed her forehead, full of gratitude. Her words healed places no applause ever could. The next morning brought a new challenge, unexpected but important. His supervisor called again, voice calm but serious. They needed him to attend a formal review of the incident. Not disciplinary, procedural, a standard protocol after any major intervention. But the idea made him tense immediately, not because of fear of consequences, but because it meant reliving the day again, memory by memory, step by step. I saw the old trembling return faintly to his hands. He exhaled, steadying himself slowly. "I can do it," he finally said. "I need to do it." Courage isn't loud. It's steady. We arrived at the district building together that morning. He asked me to wait in the lobby. I squeezed his hand before he stepped inside. "You're ready," I whispered gently. He nodded with quiet resolve. His footsteps echoed down the hallway. I sat alone, heart steady but attentive. Minutes stretched slowly like held breath. I prayed the process would be gentle with him, not dismissive, not insensitive, just humane. Eventually, the door opened softly. He walked toward me, expression calm but reflective. "How did it go?" I asked carefully. "They listened," he said simply. "They really listened." As we drove home, he shared small details, how the panel asked thoughtful questions, how they emphasized his safety and mental well-being, how they never once used the word fault. Relief softened his shoulders with every mile. "I felt respected," he said quietly. "Not praised, just respected." That mattered more to him than he expected. He turned his hand upward, palm open. I intertwined my fingers with his gently. He squeezed back, steady and warm. The air between us felt lighter, not celebratory, peaceful, like a storm finally allowing the sun through, like trust rebuilt in slow, honest layers. That afternoon, he rested on the couch with a blanket, not from exhaustion, just to breathe. The house settled into gentle quiet around him. I sat nearby, reading, letting silence speak softly. At one point he whispered, "Thank you." I looked up, surprised by the sudden emotion. "For what?" I asked tenderly. "For not pushing me, for walking beside me." His voice trembled with sincerity. "You didn't try to fix me," he continued. "You just stayed." I placed my hand over his, warm and steady. "You weren't broken," I whispered. "You were overwhelmed." He nodded, breathing deeply. Understanding finally rooted inside him. When our daughter returned home, joy filled the room instantly. She flopped onto the couch beside him, laughing freely. He embraced her with a warmth unburdened by hesitation. She told us stories from her day, animated and bright. He listened with ease, no tension in his jaw. Her presence always softened him effortlessly. At one point she asked, "Are you feeling better, Dad?" He smiled, not forced, not fragile. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think I'm getting there." Her grin widened with relief. She hugged him tightly, holding him close. Love radiated between them like soft firelight. I watched them, full of gratitude. Family can heal wounds the world doesn't see. That evening, he suggested a walk around the neighborhood, a simple gesture, yet meaningful for him. Fresh air wrapped gently around us as we stepped outside. He held my hand, warm and deliberate. "I'm starting to feel like myself again," he murmured. "Not the me from before, a fuller version." I squeezed his hand, proud of his growth. "You're becoming someone shaped by compassion," I said, "and by courage that doesn't need applause." He smiled, soft and genuine. We walked in peaceful rhythm side by side, no rush, no urgency, just presence. The streetlights flickered warmly as dusk settled. He breathed deeply, releasing the last remnants of dread. Healing had found its quiet tempo. Before bed, he paused near the doorway thoughtfully. He looked back at me with softened eyes. "You know what I realized today?" he whispered. "What?" I asked gently. "That I'm not defined by what happened. I'm defined by how I choose to grow afterward." His insight struck me with warm clarity. He walked toward me, slipping his arms around my waist. His embrace felt steady, present, whole, not seeking rescue, offering connection. He rested his forehead against mine quietly. "Thank you for seeing me," he murmured. "Always," I replied. We turned off the lights together slowly, and sleep came to him softly, like forgiveness.